Hello and welcome to this very special program on what is, without any shadow of doubt, India's single biggest problem: corruption. N. Ram has just written this excellent book on corruption in India. How bad is it? Is it getting better or is it getting worse? What are the reasons behind our corruption? And what can we do to get rid of corruption in our country? Corruption is not just a morally repugnant phenomenon. It is far worse than that. It's terrible for the economy and for progress. For instance, instead of projects going to the most efficient person, corruption ensures it goes to inefficient producers as long as they pay a higher bribe. I'll give you an example. I was on a flight with a road builder recently, and he's building roads in Mumbai and in Orissa. And he said the amount of corruption in Mumbai, the amount he has to pay, the roads he's building are actually will last only 9 months to a year. While the roads he's building in Orissa is a World Bank project, he hasn't had to pay anybody, and he's building roads that will last 10 years. That is what corruption. It leads to inefficiency and poor quality. That's what corruption is doing to our economy. It's not just moral, and it's not just a moral issue. Corruption that way is in many ways killing the people of our country slowly and surely. N. Ram, who as a journalist has exposed and fought against corruption all his life, including his major work on Bofors, has written this well-researched and beautifully written book. Honestly, it's simple and clear. Read it. It'll make you angry, furious in fact, as well as make you think. If we don't obliterate corruption in our country, we will never emerge from poverty. We will never be a great nation as long as corruption is endemic to our society. And we can get rid of corruption. It's difficult. It can be done, and its eradication is absolutely essential to make India a truly great nation. Ram, honestly, I really enjoyed reading this book. You've done a lot of work for once in your life. I mean, that's not like a journalist.
No.
A lot of research, and you, of course, always written simply and clearly. Were you impressed by the amount of work that's been done in corruption in India?
Yes, I think the literature is quite impressive,
yes.
particularly on by political economists and so on.
Yes.
And I think literature is largely at the decentralized level.
Right.
But there have been some papers which try to get the measure of it on a national scale.
Yeah.
For example, Suktankar and Vaishnav in their papers,
Very good
a
work. recent
book by Vaishnav,
Right.
They take on the issue.
Right. And of course, Arun Kumar for years.
Arun Kumar on the black money, the black economy.
Yes.
He says, yes.
International organizations working on India, Economist Intelligence Unit, and various others that you've mentioned here.
Yes.
I mean, the bibliography is huge and really worth. So we're also looking for a follow-up, which we shall talk to you in a while. But the first thing, just looking at the categories of corruption, which you start mentioning, and if you look at the categories, the types of corruption in India, there are broadly two types. If you just have a quick look, there's grand corruption and there's petty corruption. Now, if you look at grand corruption, it really boils down to high-level government decisions that distort our policies at a national level. Petty corruption is really everyday abuse by low-level officials working against ordinary citizens. That's what we feel every day. And those are the two broad, and I'm oversimplifying here, two broad categories. And within that, if we look at the different types, there's political corruption, which can be grand, it can be petty as well. That's a big a difference in this book.
It can be centralized or decentralized.
Yes, and most people think political is only at the grand, but at decentralization, you point out, there's corruption at the panchayat level, at decentralized, as you say.
Yes.
Then there's bureaucratic corruption, which again can be grand and petty because bureaucrats interact with ordinary citizens. And of course, private sector fraud and corruption.
Yes.
That's kind of underplayed a bit in India.
Yes, I think the visibility for private sector fraud
Yes.
is rather low.
Yes.
Of course, when scandals break out, then they are reported. But the endemic corruption, the endemic fraud
Yes.
in the corporate private sector, I think, is underplayed.
Yes.
And these surveys which you mentioned by the Economist Intelligence Unit,
Focus
by
on that
EY,
quite a lot. Yeah.
ASSOCHAM, I
Yes.
think have done well to
Bring that out.
bring this out.
Yeah, yeah. So in these broad categories, just let's look at what Ram categorizes as the types of corruption in India, and we can discuss each one. First among the types of corruption are, of course, what is called black money and corruption. That is an estimated 24% or more of our GDP. Arun Kumar says it's 62, so it's somewhere between 24 and 62%. But explain this, it's not just, it's kind of you're right, it's a kind of a loop between corruption and black money and vice versa. It
Yes.
causes corruption and is a creation of corruption.
As Arun Kumar, who's one of the real specialists in this field, scholars, has pointed out, the black money generation, or the black economy is not synonymous with corruption,
Right.
but they are closely interlinked.
Yes.
And so he explains it analytically, and I think he argues that if it didn't happen, there'll be huge growth benefits and development benefits,
Right.
on which that is arguable, but I
Yes,
think
but he makes that
it's a
point,
major
yeah.
point.
But it's more the symptom of a cause. I mean, the
Yeah,
cause
exactly.
is something different, but black money, which we'll come to on demonetization, is that just hitting the symptom and not hitting the disease? Let's look at a second type of corruption that Ram talks about. That is to do with the arms trade. Amazing statistics on this, Ram. Arms trade is 40% of corruption in legal international
Yes.
trade. I mean, that's huge. 40% of corruption.
That's the estimate, yes.
Yeah, estimated.
Yes.
That is obviously the biggest type of corruption in international trade, arms trade.
And India is the sixth largest military spender in the world among all countries. So it's a huge issue, huge challenge.
Right. And I mean, Bofors was obviously the tip of an iceberg.
Of course, a
and-
small change,
Yeah.
$50 million compared with
Yeah, but
the scandals of the 21st century.
But more than the amount, it exposed the system and exposed the ways in which this corruption can be bigger amounts, smaller amounts, but
Exactly.
what you exposed was all the various ways in which this is done.
I consider it the defining grand
Yes.
corruption scandal because institutions were involved,
Yes.
the state was affected, the army was affected, and so on. And yes,
Right,
it's
right.
not just the amount.
Yeah. And it had a huge impact. It kind of made exposing corruption a major journalistic enterprise in India. And the journalists have done pretty well after that on corruption.
Yes, I think journalism deserves a lot of credit
Right.
for
Of course,
blowing
we're
the
a bit
whistle on
biased
corruption.
on that, but yeah.
Yes, I think it's true.
It's
we
true,
we must
yes.
claim what is our
Yeah,
due.
that's true. Yes, yes.
Both the press and news television.
Yes, yes, yes. If we move on to the third type of corruption, again, I'm just simplifying the book, but these categories are very clearly mentioned there. And this is corporate fraud. 92% of Indian companies say they're exposed to fraud. 92%.
Of
That's
employees.
outrageous, and that's by the Economist Intelligence Unit. What exactly does this show? It's one of the worst in the world.
Yes, among G20 countries, the incidence of reported or perceived corruption is higher, significantly higher for India than for the other countries covered in that group, and it's quite a shocking finding. It emerges from at least 3 surveys, and there are more.
And that, as you say, is slightly underplayed in India. But the next one, the next category which Ram talks about, is talked about a lot. Still not much done about it, but it's talked about, and I think people are getting closer and closer to exposing it, and that's electoral funding. Let's have a look at electoral funding. Just in the 5 years, 2010 to 2014, according to the CMS, Center for Media Studies, 75,000 crores worth of black money were generated for elections.
Yes.
That's huge, Ram.
That's their estimate, and it is shocking, but it makes sense because we observe it as journalists all the time.
Yes, and you have some, I mean, in Tamil Nadu,
Yes.
it's really taken it to a new level.
Yes, the idea is to target every voter and pay the voter. Of course, there's the secret ballot, and there's no guarantee they'll vote for you, but they make them swear on their mother or on some book.
Right.
And it's now believed that most of it works.
Because there's an emotional kind of commitment.
I once had a conversation with Jayalalitha on this, and she gave up all hope. She says, I can never win an election, because she was then in the opposition.
Oh,
but it turned out she won.
She won.
But yes, when she was
But
in
how
the
much would they
opposition.
pay a voter?
I think minimum is 4,000 rupees, but this time in the RK Nagar constituency, the by-election that was countermanded by the Election Commission of India, it was expected to go up to 10,000 rupees per voter.
My God, that
Because
is...
since it was one constituency, they could concentrate. And
so between 4,000 and per voter.
Yes, everyone, regardless of whether you think he or she will vote for you or not.
So voters must wait for elections. It's a great time. Oh my God. But it makes a mockery of democracy, actually.
Yes, I think it's extremely damaging, Prannoy, because it undermines the credibility of the whole electoral process.
Yes.
And people lose hope. They're also, they compete in this area.
One candidate versus the other, one party.
And people who can't pay, they get demoralized.
Yes.
So on. Even though sometimes the electorate swims against, despite the bribe, the vote buying, they make their own choice. It's becoming increasingly hard. And Tamil Nadu undoubtedly leads
the way in this.
Leads political India in this respect.
Let's have a look at the other category. And there's a slight distinction here, right? There's electoral funding and there's political finance, political corruption. That's larger than electoral corruption, and it takes place all year. What exactly do you mean by that?
I think electoral funding is basically the issue of whether you come under that limit, how much you're allowed to spend.
Right.
For example, political parties have fewer restrictions.
Yes.
Candidates have restrictions and so on.
Yes.
But political finance is round the year, and political parties may, collect huge donations
to run their party or to buy
to buy infrastructure, to line their pockets. Some of the leaders. I mean, some of it may be for political purposes, but a lot of it goes for private gain.
What do you think of those politicians who say, "I'm not corrupt. The money I get illegally is actually for the party, not for my personal"? Is there a distinction between for my own personal benefit and for the party, or is it still corruption?
Yeah, I think once you have offshore accounts and so on and high confidentiality, the line between personal and political gets blurred and eventually disappears, which is, I think, one reason why there have been so many scandals. Even assuming that the politician is, quote, honest, in the sense they want it only for political gain, which is dishonest enough.
Right.
I think you can't really keep the line, and there'll be suspicion. Because these accounts are not transparent, these are not open.
It's corruption, whether you keep it for yourself or for the party.
It makes little difference.
Yeah. And to highlight your point, you make found this wonderful quote out of Kautilya, where, just read it. It says, this Kautilya on corruption in bureaucracy, this is, and you can apply it to politicians as well. He said, it's from the Arthashastras, of course, just as it is impossible to know when a fish is moving in water is drinking, so it is impossible to find out when government servants in charge of undertakings misappropriate money.
How true.
How true it is. When a fish moving in water, whether it's drinking or not, you can't tell. It's just so difficult to find these people.
Yeah, this has become, I think, a celebrated observation in international corruption literature when it deals with bureaucratic corruption and the problem of detection and measurement. It says so much about it, and I think it remains true. And it's a wonderfully simple, clear statement of the problem, the challenge.
Exactly. So now we've discussed the different types of corruption. What about the level of corruption? Is it really bad in India? Is it worse than other countries? How bad is corruption? And then we look at whether it's getting worse or getting better. Let's have a look at the level of corruption in India. It looks something like this. There is a high level of corruption in India. That's the sad story. A survey done, and the source for this is Ipsos, which is done for Ernst & Young, EY. 41% of people say they're prepared to act illegally, unethically, bribe, etc. 41% is a lot. And to admit it.
Yes.
There may be many more who won't actually say it in a survey.
Yeah, I think it's shocking.
It's shocking. And then the second category or second question is, 58% of people in corporates and companies say they will not even report bribery and corruption out of what they call loyalty to their company.
Yes.
What about loyalty to the country?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a bit of a cover-up that they want to do well and so on, or they get punished. But yes, if it's true, then
it's again a very high. That's 2 out of 3 people almost. And finally, what I found the most shocking is the highest number. 78%, the next category, claim that bribery and corruption is widespread in India. That's 4 out of 5 people.
Yes. Shocking. This is the folklore of corruption also, about which Gunnar Myrdal spoke earlier. He probably coined the term that people believe everyone is corrupt, particularly the higher up, and this is quite damaging.
Yeah. And it also, in the beginning category of grand and petty, it shows petty corruption is also very widespread. If almost 80% are saying it's all over, we face it, it's just getting right down to the ordinary person.
Yes, corruption is pervasive, corruption is omnipresent, and corruption is diverse or multifarious.
Yes.
These are 3 things that I think constitute the challenge.
Yeah,
it is, Prannoy, you can call it intractable.
Intractable. But you do give some solutions, which we shall come to that, but my gosh, they are tough to do, but they need to be done, otherwise we're going to get nowhere in this country. Let us again look at the extent of corruption. There's another bit of research that Ram dug out and refers to. It's a kind of index of integrity. What is the perception of integrity of our country by the whole world? We have a very poor rating on integrity. Out of 100, say 0 to 100, about 90.8, that's over 90%. Denmark rates very high on integrity. New Zealand, 90%. India, 37.6%. Now that's in the 5-year period, 2012 to 2016. Ram, if you're 37.6, you're among the worst in the world on perceptions of integrity.
Yeah, not quite the bottom of the pile, but pretty bad.
So when there's this statement, it's a global phenomenon, but it really isn't. There are a lot of countries which don't have 37.6% integrity as low as that, right?
It's a very poor score, and this is perception-based perceptions from here,
right?
From within. Our own people perceive this, and that I think is quite dispiriting, Prannoy.
Very dispiriting, and it makes you feel even more angry that something has to be done. And what have we done? What has our generation done to the society that we're leaving to the younger generation? Another slightly disturbing statistic again on the high level of corruption. We're not talking about change right now. The high level of corruption, just look at the percentage of scams in this country. High level of corruption in India, they were looking about 2000 to 2013, those 13-14 years. There have been 28 major scams which come to 1 million crores of rupees. I mean, I can't even imagine the number of zeros there. It's not 1,000 crores, not 100 crores, it's 1 million crores.
This is from a very revealing paper by Suktankar and Vaishnav.
Right.
Came out in 2013, where they look at you can say 21st century scams up to 2013, and of course they leave out Vyapam, which is another one, and if you include that, I think the damage is huge in Madhya Pradesh. Yes, it's a good exercise, and I think it gives us a measure of the problem. And this is only the outbreaks, the scams or scandals. This doesn't measure the endemic corruption,
These are the ones that burst through and get noticed and reported and highlighted. Yes. And in fact, if you look at those 28, the average on each one of those 28 is 36,000 crores each. That's the value of each major scam. I mean, this, you write about it, of course, how these are just absolutely, in absolute term, huge figures, unheard of in other countries.
Yes. So I think those in high places often enjoy immunity from proper investigation and prosecution. Some of them get investigated, but the law's delays take care of the immunity for them. And this, I think, is a problem.